This is Romans chapter 12, verse 1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of the Most High, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto the Most High, which is your reasonable service. Shalom. I want to give all praise, all honor, and all glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachah Kodash. I want to give double honors to our apostles and our elders of Great Millstone that rule well. Peace and salutations and many blessings to you elect Akim across the four winds of this earth, kicking this word in sincerity and in truth. I write under Brother Sha'ar from the Great Millstone Dallas camp, coming back at you with another lesson through the spirit of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord within us edifying. But as you've seen here, the first scripture that was brought out was pertaining to Romans, the 12th chapter. Well, it was Romans, the 12th chapter, and this is pertaining to ourselves being made that sacrifice unto the Lord. All right, and we have to look back pretty much what comes with that sacrifice. All right, us being brought forth as sheep to the slaughter, denying ourselves, being presented in front of many, all right, to be made a fool for Yahweh Shai's sake, and also, too, a very strong possibility that we could be slain for the word, all right, upon the altar, as we're on the highways and byways preaching. Okay, so as you read this and look at the things that we do in the spirit pertaining to the ministry, we are making ourselves a living sacrifice. All right. Now, the title of this lesson is going to be titled The Blood Under the Altar. OK, because I was just doing some research, doing some reading, and just wanted to bring out a few points. All right. It's probably not going to be too long, but according to however the Spirit wants it to be lengthwise. OK, but Romans, the 12th chapter, goes into how we're made that sacrifice. Okay, because when you look at the ancient world, the ones who actually did the sacrifices, the ones who slain the bullock or slain the goat or slain the lamb, had to be a priest. Okay, a priest pretty much had to partake within the sacrifice. All right, now back then we understand that the priests were under the Levitical order. All right, to be part within that to be part of the services in the tabernacle, in the temple, to be given that lot. All right, you had to be one of the sons of Aaron. All right, because when you look at Aaron, Aaron was the first high priest, and his children, his sons, were all priests under him. All right, now we understand right now in this day we're living in. All right, the sacrifices that we do now aren't pertaining to the Levitical priesthood, but it's mimicked after something that was already established. And when you go into the name Aaron or Awarwan, which means light bringer, okay, we have our high priest, which is Yahweh Shai, who is the ultimate light bringer. Okay, and as Yahweh Shai is considered in Isaiah the 9th chapter, the everlasting Father. All right, he is, of course, our big brother, but through adoption, he had brought us back, which to a degree makes him that father type figure. And we're children. Now we understand fully we're children of the Most High. And Yahweh Shai is the firstborn. Well, he's the only begotten, but he's the firstborn of many brethren. He is the everlasting Father still. All right. So pretty much when you go into it, we're those priests that are under Yahweh Shai. And again, what was the lot that the priest had? All right. They had to adorn the temple. All right. They had to offer up sacrifice. They had to preach the word pretty much. All right. They had to teach the word. They had to minister unto the nation of Israel. OK, now, when you go into this, the reason why I wanted to bring this out here. All right. I want to go to the book of Revelation, the 6th chapter, and I want to start at the 9th verse, because I found this very interesting as I was just doing a little bit of studying. And when you read this particular chapter here in Revelation 6, it's pretty much going into, as the seals are being broken, the things that are taking place during the loosening of those seals. Okay, so as you read here in Revelation, the 6th chapter, in the 9th verse, I'm going to just start from the top. It says, and when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of Yahweh and for the testimony which they held. All right. Now, when you think about the ancient tabernacle and the ancient temple, the altar, all those things that were done in regards to the ministry of the Lord. All right. When you understand how all that stuff was set up, it was pretty much set up off of a similitude or an example off of something that already existed. OK. So as Moses was on Mount Sinai, and you read this here, and matter of fact, I might as well get it really quick just for edification's sake. And I'll jump back to Revelation 6. But when you read this here, let's see, I want to start at a good point. I think it's toward the end of the chapter. Yeah. When you read Exodus 25, this is Moses receiving the instruction from the Heavenly Father as he's on Sinai. Okay. And as he explained pretty much the things that Moses had to do, it was mimicked after something that had already existed. Via example, the tabernacle, the altar, the golden censer. All right. All those things were mimicked after something that already existed in the heavens. All right. It already mimicked an eternal tabernacle. All right. You had the angels that were up there serving the Lord, and they play the role of priests too, just like we are. Just like angels play the roles of messengers, just like we are. Okay, so you have those angels that are up there in the heavens that play those different roles. Via example, you have the 24 elders that are up there that glorify the Lord continually, and they offer up the incense. All right, they handle the golden tongs. They do all those things. So when you read about how it was instructed for Moses to have these things built down here, it was already mimicked after something that had already existed, if that made sense. That's why I wanted to read this first and then jump back to Revelation, the 6th chapter. Okay, so when you read the end of this in Exodus 25 and 40, all right, and this is after Moses received all the instructions pertaining to the tabernacle and the things that had to be inside the tabernacle. Now, this is the last verse, and it says, and look that thou make them after their pattern, which would show thee in the mount. So this was a pattern that was already showed to Moses as he was in Mount Sinai. Okay, so as Moses has seen the tabernacle, as he had seen the altar, okay, as he had seen the doorway in the altar, those are things that was shown to Moses from what Moses had seen when he had spoke to the Lord. Okay, so Moses was commanded to make a carnal representation of something that had already existed in the spiritual plane, where Yahweh and Yahweh Shai dwelt around that time. Because mind you, remember, Yahweh Shai was up there in the heavens when Moses received this vision, when Moses received this instruction. Okay, so as we jump back to Revelation, the 6th chapter, and go in the 9th verse, it says, and when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar. Now, which altar is this? This is an altar that's in the heavens. Just like how there was commanded for an altar to be placed in the physical tabernacle and in the physical temple. It was mimicked after this altar that already existed. All right. Before everything was already established on the earth. Okay. So it says, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of the Most High and for the testimony which they held. All right. Now, that's why I wanted to start this lesson off in Romans, the 12th chapter, where it says, for we make ourselves a living sacrifice acceptable unto the Lord, which is our reasonable service. OK, so when you go into what a sacrifice is, that's that goat, lamb or bullock or so forth, or dove that's slain. It has to be slain because the only way for you to get right with the Lord after you committed sin, after you committed iniquity, you had to slay an animal. And it wasn't the fact that the animal just had to be slain, which it did. But what linked us back to the Lord was the blood of that animal. Because when you go into blood, all right, what's synonymous for blood is life. All right. So pretty much you had to give a life. All right. So when you look at it today, we're not slaying a bullock or slaying a he-goat or slaying a lamb. We make ourselves that sacrifice, and through our blood, that's what brings us back to the Lord, through that sacrifice. That's what's acceptable to the Lord. Okay. So as we go back in Revelation 6 and 9, he says, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain. And this is under the altar. Remember it. It says, I saw under the altar. For the brothers that might be listening, write it down or something like that. Under the altar. Because there's a point that I want to bring out here in a little bit pertaining to this. And it's something that I found that's very interesting when you read it. But it says, I saw under the altar the souls of them which were slain for the word of the Most High. All right. Now, who is the word of the Most High? That's Yahweh Shai. All right. And for the testimony which they held. All right. What's the testimony? That's the spirit of prophecy. OK, because you think about it. Once we're slain for the Lord, that's how we're made. And that's pretty much the last thought the Lord remembers us by, even though it was already written. All right. But it's a mighty work being slain for the Lord. Remember the prophets. Because when you read this here in Revelation 6 and 9, this namely can start with our ancient forefathers, the ancient apostles and the ancient prophets that were slain. Because as John the Revelator received this revelation and he had seen those men that were slain, he had to have been looking at his old companions who he ministered with. All right. You have James, his brother, who was the first martyr out of the 12. And then you even had Stephen. He wasn't of the 12, but he was slain as well. He was made a martyr. And when you look at all of the ancient men that prophesied alongside of John the Revelator, they had all died doing the work. So you can imagine John looking at this. He's seeing his old partners whose souls are under the altar. Okay. Now, I got two precepts I want to bring out because it said them that were slain for the word of the Most High, which is Yahushua. This is Revelation 14 and 13. And it says, let's see here. And I heard a voice from heaven say unto me, right, blessed are the dead which die in Yahushua. Which die in the Lord from henceforth. Okay, so if you die in the Lord, you're considered blessed, because that's the last thing. Those works are the last things that you're remembered by. And the scriptures talk about to keep a good name. All right, you read that in Ecclesiastes, the 7th chapter. Now, this is the ultimate way to keep a good name, knowing that if you were to die, you've died doing the work. You're made that acceptable sacrifice unto the Lord. All right. So it says, blessed are them which are, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth, yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works do follow them. All right. So it says their works follow them. Now, what are these works and labors pertaining to? Because this ain't talking about your physical job. This ain't talking about wherever you work at. If you die, those works will be remembered. No, because you have to remember, all right, what our job is being involved in this ministry, and that's to serve. All right. We do the services of the Most High. So we are those priests. So our services that we do are the last thing that's remembered, and they follow us if we're those men that are to be slain. And best believe, especially within these last days, you're going to have men that are going to be slain for the Lord. There's going to be certain men that aren't going to taste death, but there are going to be men that are going to die as martyrs as well, when you read about it in the scriptures. And it says, and I looked and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and his hand a sharp sickle. Now we all understand that's talking about Yahushua. But as we read it in Revelation chapter 6, verse 9, it talked about them pretty much which were slain, all right, who died for the word of the Most High, which is Yahushua. All right. So those works that you do, just like those ancient men, followed them. All right. And they were recognized as those souls which were under the altar. OK, again, remember that. Now, I got another scripture because it talked about also for the word of the Most High and also for what? Their testimony. And what's the testimony pertaining to? What is the testimony of Yahushua? This is Revelation 19 and 10. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, see thou doest it not. I am thy fellow servant and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Yahushua. All right. Worship the Most High. For the testimony of Yahushua is the spirit of prophecy. OK, so these men were remembered by their testimony. They were slain. They were slain pretty much by their testimony in Yahushua, pushing prophecy. All right. Just like our ancient forefathers in the ancient world past. All right. And that blood that was shed was sent up to the Lord and it was remembered. All right. So let's go back to where I left off at Revelation chapter 6 and verse 10. And it reads, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true? Dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Now, this is a question that a lot of men will ask, because we understand that the Lord is going to avenge the men, But reason why it's asked how long, because you have the wicked that are just roaming free. They're living their lives to the fullness of their sufficiency, just living good. And then you have 2/3 of our own people, which are the prophet killers. They just going on the comment boards, talking and scoffing, talking shit, and ain't nothing happening. Now, we understand that the Lord is going to avenge his elect. But this is just a question that's asked because as we're down here prophesying, preaching the word, all right, made a spectacle, being fools for Yahushua's sake, all right, being what's the word I'm looking for? Being in straits, being in captivity, being persecuted. It could seem like forever. At the end of the day, this is our punishment. This is hell. And hell can seem like an eternity, all right, when you're looking at it from a fleshly standpoint. All right, this flesh will have you thinking this, okay? But ultimately, we understand the Lord is going to avenge his elect, okay? But when you go into it, it says, and they cried with a loud voice. So these are the souls that were under the altar that John the Revelator seen of his fellow companions, which were crying unto the Lord. Now we understand that those ancient men either are back today or they might have came back and died again, but they're still pushing forth this ministry. We're still pushing forth this ministry, crying unto the Lord, because that's part of our job. That's part of the sacrifice. All right. Matter of fact, let's get this here in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 19, verse 20. And this is pretty much, when you read it, one of my favorite chapters, going into how there's altars that are set in the midst of the land of Egypt. All right. And Egypt is pertaining to America, and the places that we preach at are pertaining to the altars. All right. And as we preach, our prayers and our the song that we're singing is being risen up like the smoke of a sacrifice. OK, so when you read this here, it says, and it shall be for a sign and for a witness. And what is for a sign and for a witness? The sacrifice that we're offering to the Lord on this altar. All right. And it shall be for a sign and for a witness unto Yahweh of hosts in the land of Egypt. For they shall cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors, and he shall send them a savior and a great one, and he shall deliver them. All right. Now, when you read this here, find it very interesting that it's parallel to pretty much how the Most High is going to avenge his own elect, because you read this here in Luke, the 18th chapter. Let's see here. I'm trying to find a good place to start off on. When you read this here in Luke 18:7, start at 6, it says, and the Lord said, and this is Yahushua, hear what the unjust judge said. Here's what the unjust judge said. And shall not the Most High avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear along with them? All right. So, hey, you have brothers that are in the spirit world right now complaining and crying to the Lord to avenge us. All right. And just as they're complaining and crying to the Lord, as they're presented as those souls under the altar, all right, we're down here as well on the physical altar, complaining and crying unto the Lord day and night to avenge us. All right. It says, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear along with them. I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? Now, when you read this here, it links up perfectly with Isaiah, the 19th chapter, going into that altar that's in the midst of the land of Egypt, which is made for a sign. All right. And it says they cry unto the Lord for the Lord, and the Lord will avenge them. And also, too, what was read in Revelation, the 6th chapter. I'm jumping back down to the end of it, in the end of verse 10. All right. It says, and they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, doest thou not judge and avenge our blood on them which dwell on the earth? OK, again, the lesson is titled the blood under the altar. OK, because this is synonymous for those men that are slain doing the work. And you look at it spiritually, how we die all the day long, and we're presented as those sheep brought forth unto the slaughter. OK, now, when you look at a sacrifice, like I mentioned earlier, and look at the key component in regards to sacrifice that's important, all right, that links us to the Lord, the key component is the blood of that sacrifice. Because when you look at that blood, there's life within the blood. OK, and as we're here prophesying, and those men that are down here, and they might die in the Lord, or as we die all day long, that's acceptable to the Lord. All right. That's that link, which we understand Yahushua is the link. And through Yahushua's blood, we were brought back unto him. But the key point going into the blood. All right. And how the blood links us back. OK, because, again, there's life within the blood. OK, now, I was reading this in the law because, again, as what was read in Exodus 25th chapter, went into how Moses was commanded to set up the tabernacle. And when you went to verse 40 in chapter 25, it was mimicked after the patterns of the things in the heavens, right? So when you go, let's go to the law now on the carnal aspect, because we just read the spiritual, right? How those souls of those men were under the altar and the souls of those men's blood was shed. Again, it said at the end of verse 10, O Lord, holy and true, doest thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwellest on the earth? Okay, so the blood is what these men are asking to be avenged. All right. So let's go to the law in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 4, verse 7. Now, this is the law, and this is pertaining to this is a sacrifice for a sin of ignorance. Now, you have different types of offerings that was done, and blood had to be shed within all of them. But I found this very interesting when you read this here in Leviticus, the 4th chapter, the 7th verse. And when you read it, it says, and the priest shall put some of the blood upon the horns of the altar of a sweet incense before the Lord. All right. Now, this blood was the blood of a bullock, the blood of a sacrifice. All right. And it says, and shall pour all the blood of the bullock at the bottom of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Now, you see the links between Leviticus 4 and 7 in Revelation, the 6th chapter, because in Revelation, the 6th chapter, going into the souls of those men that cried continually to the Lord for their blood to be avenged, these were the souls that were at the bottom of the altar. All right. So you read this here in Leviticus 4 and 7, and it said, and they shall pour all the blood of the bullock at the bottom of the altar of the burnt offering. So just as you see how the blood of the bullock was shed, all right, and this, when you go into this, you know, the priest had to sprinkle their hand in the blood and then fling it 7 times. You know, there was blood out that was also poured at the bottom of the altar. Now, we all understand that as the Lord had set this up initially, there was meaning behind it. He didn't just have it done for no reason. All right. As the scriptures say, who can know the mind of the Most High? But you see the spiritual link going into this, because you have the altar, which is in the heavens. And what dwells at the bottom of that altar? The souls of those men, which blood was shed. Just like you have the physical altar in the ancient world, the blood of that bullock or of that sacrifice. So you link that with the end of the day, we are made as that living sacrifice. And as that blood was poured at the bottom of the altar for that bullock that was slain, all right, you look at it today as we make ourselves that living sacrifice. Whether we die in the faith, whether we're those brothers that are already up there complaining to the Lord, which are the souls presented under the altar whose blood was shed, or the brothers that are right here crying unto the Lord, making themselves a sacrifice, being on the altar. You know, at the end of the day, this is a sacrifice that's being done, you know. So, hey, Lord, when that made sense, again, I found that real interesting as I was doing some reading, and I just wanted to put it on wax. But I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to our apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings and salutation to you elect Akim across the 4 winds of this earth, kicking this word in sincerity and in truth. And again, the title of this lesson is The Blood Under the Altar. Shalom.